Hello, and welcome to today's Saturday Sit Down. This conversation is reflecting on a discussion that I just had with my girlfriend, Alison. Well, it didn't just happen, but it aired this Thursday. And I do like the whole idea of being outside, so I'm trying my backyard. So yes, my sister Yolanda and my mom live next door, so I'm literally in both of our backyards at the moment. So if my mom comes out, I won't be surprised because I didn't tell her I was doing this. First of all, I want to say that I am so grateful for Alison to bring to light the importance of when someone we know is grieving, to put ourselves aside and to be able to make them first. And if you are the person grieving, that other people are willing to sacrifice their level of comfort to be there with you. Just in the same way that I am willing to have these conversations that, please understand, are still uncomfortable to some extent to me today, to rehash, to relive, and to go over these different points. But I know that it is valuable for you to be able to understand that I understand where you're at, that I understand it may not look exactly the same. Everybody's grief is different, but that you understand that I do unfortunately have the experience of losing someone that I love very dearly. And when we are sharing or we're speaking and connecting about grief, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a life coach. I am a woman who has loved a man for 32 years, and he is no longer in this world. And I am sharing with you from that perspective. So thank you for being here with me on this journey and allowing my process to be part of yours and be able to share something that will help you along the way. So as I go into this conversation with Alison, I want to talk about how nervous she was. I was so glad she was able to get a glass of wine and sort of like decompress. But her anxiety, her stress, her nervousness did not stop her from showing up. And I want that to really resonate with you, that your nervousness, your anxiety, your level of uncomfort, if you are the friend of someone that is grieving, please don't let that stop you from showing up. Please don't let your discomfort with dealing with death, don't let your anxiety of being in the room and how comfortable it make you prevent you from being there for your friend, because they need you. This is a devastating experience, and they need you to be there so they're not alone. And if you are the person that's grieving, and it is this difficult, and it is this challenging, yeah, it is. There is no magic wand I have to wave and to make it different. There is no words that I can say to make it all go away. But what I can tell you is, you are not alone. That there are other people experiencing this with you, that there are other people grieving, and we are connecting with each other to encourage each other as we all experience our own individual journey, but know that we're not doing it by ourselves. So you can connect with me and send an email to widowhoodrealtalk@gmail.com. You can go to our website, widowhood-realtalkwithtina. How did I forget that? It's a nonprofit. Good gosh, I just let it go like that. Or you can do hashtag WR Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, so WRWTW, and you can find out how to connect with our social and everything else. My mind just lost. It's just too nice outside. So one of the things that Alison talked about is her love of football. So I am not a football person, but I'm Chicago, so I just always say for the Bears. But Mark loved him some football, and he loves Steelers, and so does Alexander. So that was a kindred love between Alison, Mark, and Alexander, and Alison's son, that just went on all the time. Like if I text Alison during a football game, she's like, "Tina, is this important?" And I was like, "No, sorry, I wasn't paying attention to the football schedule." But when they were doing all of this football, Catherine and I were literally just there for the food and the socialization. We were not there for like who cared, who won. But Alison and Mark, They were like talking to the football team. They're screaming through the TV. They're rooting for their team. And I'm just there just watching and enjoying it because it's just a lot of activity and I just take it in. I love that. Like Alison talked a little bit about their entertainment room, but literally when you go upstairs, the room, there's no tape, but mentally there is. Like half the room is all Steelers, everything, and then it's the other side. So I'll just let you know. Her husband's team is the Cowboys. So was not mentioned during the podcast, but that is the truth. So the other half is cowboy paraphernalia. And it's just interesting to go up there and see the different things. So if I'm traveling and going through an airport, I'll take pictures if I'm in one of their hometowns location and there's information or there's paraphernalia in the airport. See if they have something that in the airport that they don't have and pick that up and bring it. But at this point, they have just about everything. So if you enjoy watching football, and heck, if you enjoy playing football, that may be something that you do that helps you not be so closed in and shut off. That may be difficult, I understand, because it may have been something that you enjoy with your loved one, but there are friends in that experience that are probably waiting to reconnect with you and to scream about the football and enjoy that piece and be there surrounding you. So I encourage you, whatever it may be for you, maybe you're part of a walking club, maybe you're part of a crochet group, maybe you go golfing, whatever those activities are that you may have put on pause as you are grieving, I encourage you, the weather's getting warm, people are socializing, to maybe try it one time. Maybe try connecting with the people in that circle that you enjoy that activity with and see how that works for you. And journal the night after you do that and say, I went to get with my golf buddies. I got together with my book club and this is how I felt. And maybe lean into that. Because those socialization activities are extremely helpful. At least I have found them to be so. One of the things that Alison also talked about is the idea of making friends when you are an adult. I never really thought about that being difficult, but I can see the perspective that when we're children, we are used to, we're just flexible, we're more bendable, we go back and forth and do things. But then as we become adults, we get kind of set in our ways. And the idea of making new friendships can be difficult. And I wanted to talk about this because I remember when Mark passed, I wasn't sure how it was going to go maintaining friendships with all the married couples that I knew, or people that I had friendship with that also included Mark, single or married, because I just didn't know how they were going to accept just me. And I also, in talking to widows and reading different books, found that a lot of widow and widowers felt as if their married friends rejected them when they were single for a lot of different reasons, whether there was uncomfortability, jealousy, yada, yada, yada. And sometimes the single person didn't always feel comfortable being that third leg or that other odd part of the relationship. So I started doing these things called meetup. I started joining book clubs. I started creating relationships outside of the ones that I had when Mark was living, because I wasn't quite sure if I fit in anymore. So those may be some things for you to do. And you may find that you create some friendships that really work. Some of those meetup groups, we would just go to different restaurants every month. Some of them were a book club. Some of them were sports related. Meetup I found was pretty good. Not a dating thing, just connecting with other people with similar interests. I joined a bike club. I did a lot of different things, and I still support some of those now. In my particular situation, I'm grateful to say that the friends that I had before Mark passed, they stayed. They hung in. They dug in like nobody's business. But it also allowed me to make some new friendships. So if you're apprehensive about making new friendships, give it a try. And let me know how it goes with some new friendships. And let me know if what you find on Meetup. I'd like to hear what your experience is with that too. The other thing that Allison talked about, her and I spoke about, was my first loss. And my first loss was a miscarriage. Alison and I were pregnant together with the first time for our children. And Mark and I were so excited. And in fact, when I had my doctor's appointment, when I found out that the baby's heartbeat was no longer there, it was actually on Mark's birthday. And if you've had a miscarriage, I am so sorry, because it is extremely painful. One of the books that I read during that time was A Deeper Shade of Grace. And it was a woman speaking about multiple miscarriages that she had. And I was devastated. I remember after the ultrasound and them telling me that they couldn't hear a heartbeat, and then telling me that I needed to have a DNC, it was just a fog. I was not hearing a lot of anything. I remember sitting in the car in the parking lot. I want to say I called Mark and told him what was going on, and I may have called some of my siblings. And I think Alison and I spoke during that time too. And it was just much of a fog. It was horrible. It was miserable. I went from being totally excited to being totally deflated, and just thinking, are we ever going to have children? How is this going to work? Why was I doing this? I remember a few months on after the miscarriage and after having the DNC procedure, sitting in our driveway, changing the license plate on a red Dodge Colt, because that's just how I remember the car, and just being lost in the grief, and just sitting there with the screwdriver, just digging in the dirt, and just thinking and crying. And I think an hour went by just doing that. There were times I would show up at friends' homes to talk about something randomly, and just mumbling off and not really being on track with anything. And it was hard. I remember when we were thinking about trying again, how nervous and scared I was to think about getting pregnant and the idea of losing another child. I'm grateful that we were able to have Catherine and Alex, but it was very uncomfortable. It was very scary. And I want to share that to say that after a loss, trying something that looks similar to something that could bring you joy can be devastating. And I want you to try. I want you to consider, I'm not going to let this current loss prevent me from living. I know it's hard to say that. I know it's hard to feel that. But in little steps, just try it. Little steps, find ways to bring yourself joy as you continue living. Because you are part of my hood, and you are listening to this conversation, and you do have a life to live. And I want to encourage you to be able to do that. One of the things also that Alison talked about was never taking life for granted. Never just getting on automatic and on a schedule. Alison is my most spontaneous friend, besides my sister Venus, who you did not meet. And it encourages me to find some level of spontaneity, because I am Little Miss Routine. I am Little Miss Schedule. So I do try little ways to try to be like, okay, I'm not going to plan anything. Even like this coming weekend, like to this Saturday, it's like I thought of all these different things I could do, and I was like, besides the Saturday sit down, we're going to not have a plan. I'm just going to let the day take itself by course and see how it goes. I am thinking of some barbecue, that I want some ribs, but we'll see how that goes. But being able to have Alison close by and just showing up and just randomly stopping over is me trying to live in the moment. So I am trying to do more of that. And I encourage you. You may just wake up and say, you know what? Today I'm going for a walk. And just go for a walk. Everything may not be planned out, but just do it. You may drive down the road and go, you know, that's a restaurant that I wanted to check out. I'm going to do it. Maybe that's a person that I want to say hi to. I'm just going to reach out and do it. Maybe the idea of planning different new things to do may cause too much stress, and maybe being spontaneous may be a better way for you to be able to try some new activities. So you can take the idea of being spontaneous from Alison and the idea of trying something new and put them together and see how that goes. Let me know how it works out for you. Another thing that Allison talked about was being positive. And when you are grieving, it can be so hard to be positive because everything, at least I know for me, when Mark initially passed, everything would trail back to, and Mark is no longer here. I would say, well, I may be happy about this, but 3 steps into it, I could connect it to the idea that he does no longer exist. And I want to encourage you to the reality that it's okay. Maybe you try to be positive, and the 6th step into thinking about what you're positive may bring you back to the loss of your loved one. But you know what? You were able to think of 3 steps of things that you were positive about. And maybe over time, as you do that, you may find more and more things that you are positive about. It may be, I remember waking up and going, I'm alive today. That was my 1 step. 2, okay, I could do something else. 3rd, it was Mark is not here. It took me a while to build up to 6 different things that I could think about without thinking about Mark's passing. And you know what I came to the conclusion about? It's okay, because that is my grief, and that's what it looked like. So for you, depending on what the steps are and what the things you connect, you may wake up finding 3 things, you may wind up finding 6, but whatever it is, you're still trying, and you're still getting up every day, and you are walking through it. One of the other things that Alison talked about is realizing that every day is a new day that I get to do it right. And that is so exciting. So yesterday, you may have blew 3 or 6 different things. Today, you may get 3 or 6 different things right as far as how your goals are. And that is something to be celebrated. And I want to encourage you to do that. Now, I did mention about Allison's wonderful gift of making whiskey sours. So let me put this disclaimer out there. You're not trying to drink through your grief. You're not trying to lose your liver in this process. Drinking is not a big thing for me, but I can enjoy an occasional glass of wine and a very nice whiskey sour. And that was a moment in time where I enjoyed it very much. Is it something that I'm swinging back every weekend? Nope, it doesn't work for me. I don't recommend it for you. And if you find that you are consuming more alcohol now than you did before your loved one existed, that you may want to seek help with your physician, maybe clergy, your therapist, and talk about some things that you find yourself obsessively doing now that you didn't do before your loved one passed. I also spent a lot of time in the gym. I talked about, I had an elliptical machine that was out in the sunroom. I brought it into the front room because I realized that I was awake at all hours of the night and I needed something to do. So it was me on the elliptical watching television at 2 o'clock in the morning because nobody was in the house but me, and I needed something to do. So yes, grief is going to hit you, and you are going to have something to do when the grief comes. And I encourage you to just think about some things that you enjoy doing. It may be walking, it may be reading, it may be cross-stitching. But for me, it wasn't anything that had a good amount of mental requirement. It needed to be something I could do sort of like on autopilot. So getting on the elliptical and just doing that while I was watching television was super easy for me. Tell me what you think of some super easy things for you to do while you're grieving, and to try to maybe pull yourself out of that very fog and difficult place. I want to hear what you have for suggestions. Please write them in the comments section. Oh my gosh. The idea of thinking about that Alice's husband and son helped Mark move into the apartment, and then Alison and some friends were also part of moving Mark out of the apartment, was just like, to me. I don't know how to even think that those two would have happened. And I remember the phone call when Mark was moving into that apartment in Portsmouth, and they were going to Williamsburg to pick up a mattress, And he wasn't like on the first or second floor. He was like way up there. I want to say like 7 or 10. And as Allison's husband and son are moving the mattress up and down each floor. And when they finally got there, I think they wanted to throw that mattress in there and forget about Mark and throw him in there too. But it was a lot of work, but they stuck in there. And then on the flip side, for Allison and my friends to be there to clean up that apartment and do that, I am just so grateful. Words cannot truly express how grateful I am for them to be willing to take on that burden and lift that weight off of me to be able to do that. And now here it is, 6 years later, I am living 2 miles from Allison. And yes, I do get in my pajamas and jump over there and go like, oh, are you making coffee? If you're making coffee like at this time, let me know, I'm coming over. And my sister Yolanda and I going over there because Allison can make some yummy cake. Ooh, yes, we do run over. Like, she'll post something on her social media and be like, I just made cake. I was like, are you home? Next thing you know, hey, can I get a slice of that? Can I wrap some up? Can I bring it home? And she does. I said it to say, back to being spontaneous. Planning can be too much, but just winging it sometimes can be fun. So I encourage you to find ways to just wing it, because the thinking process can be too much. There is a saying, what are friends for? This is what friends are for. And then it's ... This is your opportunity to let your friends know this is what friends are for. Let them know that grief is a long game. It's not like you go through after a year of celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, check, that everything is done. One of the things that we didn't talk about is on the 1-year anniversary of Mark's death, Alison opened her home up, my sister and friends, and we got together and we celebrated him. There was food, there were fun times, there were stories being shared about Mark. We were catching up, and everyone was there just honoring his life and talking about the memories. I am so grateful to Alison being so intentional and being committed to our friendship. In the beginning of the conversation, we talked about how one time I was on a work trip and she showed up so tired. I remember she came to my hotel and she was sitting down and we were talking, and then I looked over and she was asleep. I put a blanket on her and just kind of like gently laid her down. And I was just so grateful that she had been up early in the morning, had all these things to do, but she wanted to spend time with me. Alison showed me early on that what friendship looked like for her was always putting herself on the back burner and making her friend important. And I am grateful for that. I am grateful for how she shows up in my life, and it makes me show up for her the same way, because that level of friendship is something to be valued. Learning to be spontaneous, I think I covered that. When I asked Alison, did she have any closing comments, she said she didn't. And I love that answer, because she said the reason why she didn't is because each person handles death differently. Each person is grieving differently. So she didn't feel like there was a one answer for everyone. But what she did eventually say is, depending on your relationship with the person that's grieving, depends on how you're going to support them. And if you are the person grieving, depending on how you're grieving is going to depend on how you need support. The way you may grieve the death of a child versus the death of a sibling, a parent, or a spouse is all going to be different. And then if you've lost people close to each other, it's going to be different. How they pass, whether it was a prolonged illness or a sudden unexpected death. All of those things together are going to determine how you help the person grieving, and it's going to determine how they are grieving. But what we do know is they are grieving, and they need us. And best thing we can do is to be there with them, put ourselves on the back burner, and find out what they need for that moment, and do what we can to support them. So I think this is a good roll up of the conversation with my friend Alison. I encourage you to listen to the audio, look at the video, and take some points and let me know what works for you. Have a good day.